But it wasn't just his classmates. At work, his boss, who used to criticize him endlessly, now seemed unsure how to treat him. He still did his job as usual, but with a quiet efficiency that made it clear he was no longer desperate to hold on to it. The same coworkers who once ignored him began noticing him, sensing something different but unable to figure out what had changed. Deep inside, he felt a sense of satisfaction, not because he had proved them wrong, but because he no longer needed their validation. Their opinions no longer defined him, and that realization was more valuable than anything money could buy. Something inside him had changed. The same world that once felt suffocating now seemed different. Not because it had changed, but because he had. The insults, the judgmental looks, and the constant feeling of not being good enough no longer held him back. Instead of shrinking under the weight of others' opinions, he stood taller, more confident, and more aware of his worth. At school, he no longer avoided eye contact or tried to disappear into the background. When people looked at him, expecting the same timid reactions, he met their gaze with quiet assurance. He didn't need to argue or prove anything. His confidence spoke for itself. The classmates who once ridiculed him were now caught off guard by his composed attitude. They whispered behind his back, but their words no longer had the same power. Even his posture had changed. He walked with a quiet determination, no longer hurrying through the hallways with his head down. He took his time, observing everything around him, and for the first time he felt in control of his life. At work, his newfound confidence didn't go unnoticed. His boss, who once scolded him for the smallest mistakes, seemed to hesitate now. There was something about the way he handled tasks, efficient, focused, and without fear, that made it clear he wasn't the same desperate employee anymore. He didn't over-apologize for things that weren't his fault, and he didn't let criticism affect him the way it used to. Even his co-workers sensed the change. They noticed how he spoke with more certainty, how he no longer shied away from responsibilities, and how he carried himself with an air of quiet assurance. Some were curious, others envious, but none of them could figure out what had caused this shift in him. But it wasn't just how he acted around others. It was how he felt inside. He no longer dreaded facing each day. Instead of waking up with the weight of hopelessness pressing down on him, he felt a sense of purpose. He had a plan, a goal, and for the first time in his life, the belief that he could achieve it. Despite his growth, he remained careful. He understood that confidence wasn't about showing off or seeking revenge. It was about knowing his worth without needing to prove it to anyone. He still dressed the same, spoke humbly, and kept his routine familiar, but now there was an unshakable resolve within him that no one could ignore. Looking at himself in the mirror one evening, he saw someone he barely recognized. The person staring back at him wasn't the weak, uncertain boy from before. He was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And this was just the beginning. Despite the changes in his life, he knew one thing for sure. He had to stay careful. The money, the system, and his growing confidence were all things he couldn't afford to reveal. If people found out, questions would follow, and with questions came problems. He had learned the hard way that not everyone would be happy about his success, so he kept things simple. He still wore the same clothes, still took the same routes, and still spoke with the same quiet tone. He made sure not to spend too much at once, only allowing himself small upgrades that wouldn't attract attention. Instead of flashy purchases, he focused on practical improvements, better meals, small repairs to his apartment, and replacing old, broken things little by little. At school, he kept his head down, staying away from unnecessary conversations. When people noticed, he seemed more focused, and asked if something had changed. He just shrugged and said, "I guess I'm just trying harder." It was a simple response, believable enough to avoid suspicion. Even at work, where his efficiency had improved, he avoided drawing attention. He turned down extra shifts, not wanting anyone to question why he suddenly didn't need the extra money. When his boss asked if he was planning something new, he simply smiled and replied, "Just taking it one day at a time." But keeping his success hidden wasn't always easy. There were moments when he wanted to break free from his old life, to show everyone how far he had come. Walking past those who once mocked him, he sometimes felt the urge to say, "Look at me now." But he held back. He knew patience was key. Revealing too much too soon could ruin everything he had worked so hard for. He became good at blending in, balancing between who he used to be and who he was becoming. He learned to enjoy his small victories privately, reminding himself that the right moment to truly change his life would come. Until then, he had to move carefully, making sure no one suspected a thing. As days passed, he realized that hiding his success wasn't just about staying safe, it was about staying smart. The world wouldn't hand him anything for free, and if he wanted to keep his advantage, he had to remain cautious. Every move had to be calculated, every step had to be planned. Sitting in his apartment one night, he looked at the hidden cash beneath his floor and smiled to himself. He wasn't ready to show the world what he had achieved, not yet. But when the time came, he would be prepared. For now, he would keep playing the part everyone expected him to play, the quiet, struggling boy they all knew, while secretly becoming someone far greater. Sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, he stared at the bundles of cash hidden beneath the floor. The excitement of finding the money had settled, and now reality was setting in. This money wasn't just a lifeline, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to finally escape the life he had always known, to leave behind the struggles that had defined him for so long. But the question lingered in his mind. Where should he start? For the first time, he had the chance to make choices for himself. No longer did he have to live paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by. No more skipping meals or wearing clothes long past their time. But deep down, he knew that simply spending the money wouldn't be enough. If he wanted to truly change his life, he had to be smart about it. He sat down and pulled out a notebook, something he had never done before. Writing down his thoughts, his needs, and his dreams felt strange, almost foreign. But as he listed them out, one thing became clear. He didn't want temporary relief. He wanted long-term change. First, he thought about his education. His grades had suffered because of his struggles, and now he had the means to invest in himself. He considered hiring tutors, buying better study materials, and focusing on his future career. He knew that improving his knowledge was key to securing a stable future. Then he thought about his living situation. His apartment was barely livable. Cracks in the walls, broken fixtures, and constant leaks made every day miserable. He decided that finding a better place to live, somewhere quieter and safer, would be a smart first step. Not something flashy, but something that gave him peace of mind. His health was another thing he had always ignored. Cheap meals and constant stress had taken a toll on him, and he knew that if he didn't take care of himself now, it would only get worse. Eating healthier, exercising, and getting enough rest. All of it seemed possible now, but more than anything, he wanted to prove to himself that he could do this. He had to believe that he was capable of creating a better life. The system had given him an opportunity, but it was up to him to use it wisely. As he stared at his list, a sense of purpose filled him. This time, things would be different. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was planning, thinking, and preparing for something big. With a deep breath, he closed his notebook and looked around his small apartment one last time.